What would you do if you had only $700 left in your bank account, and someone else needed it more than you? This is the story of Emma Taylor, a single mother who made one selfless decision that changed her life forever. But what happened next was something no one could have predicted, not even her. Emma Taylor tightened her scarf against the biting November wind as she walked home from her second job at a downtown cafe. Her hands were cold, her feet ached, and her mind was heavy with worry about how to stretch the last $702 in her savings account until payday. She glanced down at Lily's worn-out sneakers peeking out of her backpack and sighed. Her 6-year-old daughter deserved so much more than hand-me-downs and thrift store clothes, but life hadn't given Emma many options. As she turned the corner onto Fifth Avenue, something, or rather, someone, caught her eye. A man sat slumped against the brick wall of a closed coffee shop, his head bowed low. His tattered jacket barely shielded him from the chill, and a cardboard sign rested beside him that read, "Homeless Vet. Anything helps." Emma hesitated for a moment before approaching him. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, kneeling down to meet his gaze. The man looked up, revealing weathered features etched with exhaustion and sorrow. His eyes, though tired, held a flicker of dignity. "I'm Jake," he said hoarsely. "Just trying to get by." Jake explained that he'd served in Afghanistan but returned home to find himself unable to adjust to civilian life. He lost his job, then his apartment, and eventually hope itself. As he spoke, Emma felt tears welling up in her own eyes. She knew what it was like to feel invisible, to struggle every day just to survive. But unlike Jake, she still had a roof over her head and a daughter who loved her unconditionally. Her heart raced as she weighed her options. Could she really afford to help him? That $702 was supposed to cover rent, groceries, and maybe even a small Christmas gift for Lily. Yet, as she stared into Jake's weary face, she couldn't ignore the voice inside her whispering, "He needs this more than you do." Without another thought, Emma pulled out her wallet and handed over the cash. "Take care of yourself, Jake," she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. Jake stared at the bills in disbelief. "You don't have to do this," he murmured, his voice cracking. "Yes, I do," Emma replied, forcing a smile. "We'll figure things out." As she walked away, guilt mingled with pride washed over her. What would she tell Lily? How would they make ends meet now? These questions swirled in her mind as she trudged through the icy streets toward their tiny apartment. But just as Emma began calculating how to explain this to her daughter, her phone buzzed with a text notification. It was from her landlord, "Your rent check bounced due to insufficient funds." Panic set in. Her chest tightened as she realized the gravity of what she'd done. She had nothing left. Not even enough to feed Lily dinner tonight. And then, as if fate itself wanted to intervene, a sleek black car slowed down beside her. The window rolled down, revealing a sharply dressed man with piercing blue eyes. "Miss Taylor," he said smoothly. "My name is Alexander Hartwell. May I speak with you for a moment?" Emma froze, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified. Who was this man, and why did he know her name? On her way home, Emma received a call from her landlord saying her rent check bounced due to insufficient funds. Panic set in. Just as Emma began calculating how to explain this to Lily, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. A man stepped out, a billionaire named Alexander Hartwell. Why was he there? Emma hesitated, clutching her scarf tighter around her neck as she stared at the man in the sleek black car. His tailored suit and polished demeanor screamed wealth, but there was something about his piercing blue eyes that unsettled her. "How do you know my name?" she asked cautiously, taking a step back. Alexander Hartwell stepped out of the car, his movements deliberate yet unhurried. He held up his hands in a gesture of reassurance. "I saw what you did earlier," he said, his voice calm and measured. "You gave everything you had to Jake Thompson. I wanted to understand why." Emma blinked, caught off guard by his words. "It's not really any of your business," she replied, though her tone lacked conviction. She wasn't used to being noticed, let alone questioned by someone who looked like they belonged on the cover of a magazine. "I think it is," Alexander countered gently. "People like you are rare these days. People who put others before themselves. Tell me, Emma, How does it feel to give away your last dollar? The question struck a nerve. Emma glanced down at her empty wallet, then back at Alexander. It feels terrifying, she admitted quietly. But it also feels right. Jake needed help more than I did. Alexander nodded thoughtfully, his expression softening. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to her. If you're free tomorrow morning, come see me at this address. I'd like to talk more about what you've done, and maybe offer you an opportunity. Emma frowned, skeptical. What kind of opportunity? You'll find out if you show up, Alexander said with a small smile before climbing back into his car. As he drove away, Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the card in her hand. The logo on it read Hartwell Foundation, accompanied by an address in Midtown Manhattan. Her mind raced as she continued walking home. Who was this man, and why was he so interested in her? Was this some kind of scam? Or was he genuinely trying to help? When Emma finally arrived at her apartment, she found Jake waiting outside her building. He stood awkwardly, shifting from one foot to the other, holding a wad of cash in his hand. Emma, he began, his voice thick with emotion, I can't take all of this. You need it more than I do. Before she could protest, he pressed half the money into her palm. Please, just take it. I already called a shelter. They're going to help me get back on my feet. But you've got a kid to take care of. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she accepted the money. She wanted to argue, to insist that Jake keep it all, but she knew he wouldn't budge. Instead, she hugged him tightly, whispering, Thank you. As Jake walked away, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening here, something she didn't fully understand yet. Little did she know, Jake had already contacted someone important about her act of generosity. Someone who would change her life forever. Do you believe in karma? Alexander had asked her earlier, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. At the time, Emma hadn't known how to respond. Now, standing alone in her dimly lit apartment, she wondered if karma was about to catch up with her, in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. The next morning, Emma woke up to dozens of missed calls and text messages from unknown numbers. Her phone buzzed incessantly, each notification bringing a fresh wave of anxiety. Who were these people, and why were they reaching out to her? As Emma scrolled through the flood of messages, one stood out, Emma, we need to talk. Meet me at the foundation office as soon as possible. It was signed Alexander Hartwell. What did he want now? And why did it feel like her world was about to be turned upside down? Emma stared at her phone, her heart pounding as she scrolled through the endless notifications. Each message seemed more urgent than the last. Some were from reporters asking for interviews. Others were from strangers thanking her for inspiring them. One email caught her eye, a video link with the subject line, "You need to see this." With trembling fingers, she clicked on it. The screen lit up with footage of Jake sitting on the sidewalk outside the coffee shop where they'd met. He was holding up a handwritten sign that read, "This woman gave me her last $700. She's my hero." Below the sign was a photo of Emma handing him the cash, captured by someone passing by. The video had gone viral overnight. Thousands of comments poured in, praising Emma's selflessness. Donations flooded into Jake's newly created GoFundMe page, raising over $50,000 in less than 24 hours. Strangers across the country shared their own stories of struggle and resilience, crediting Emma's act of kindness for reminding them of humanity's goodness. Emma sat stunned, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't expected any of this, certainly not the outpouring of support or the sudden spotlight. But amidst the whirlwind, one question lingered in her mind. Why was Alexander Hartwell involved? What did he want from her? Determined to find answers, Emma made her way to the address on the business card he'd given her. The Hartwell Foundation's office was located in a sleek skyscraper overlooking Central Park. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by an assistant who led her to Alexander's private office. He stood by the window, gazing out at the city skyline, but turned when she entered. "Emma," he said warmly, gesturing for her to sit. "I assume you've seen the news?" She nodded, still processing everything. "What's going on, Mr. Hartwell? Why are you so interested in me?" Alexander leaned forward, his expression serious yet kind. "Call me Alexander. And I'm interested because people like you are exactly who I've been looking for. My foundation helps struggling veterans and families in need, but we've struggled to connect emotionally with the public. Your story, it resonates. It inspires." Emma frowned, unsure what to say. "So, what does that mean for me?" "It means I want to hire you," Alexander replied simply. "Not just as an employee, but as someone who can lead our marketing efforts. Your creativity, your empathy, they're exactly what we need to make a real difference." Emma's breath hitched. A job offer? From a billionaire? It sounded too good to be true. "But I'm not qualified," she protested. "I'm just a barista and a freelance graphic designer." "You underestimate yourself," Alexander countered firmly. "Qualifications aren't everything. Passion is. And you have that in spades." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Jake. When she answered, his voice was filled with gratitude. "Emma, I don't know how to thank you," he said. "Because of you, I've got housing lined up, counseling appointments, even job training programs. But there's something else." His tone shifted, becoming hesitant. "There's a reason Alexander reached out to you specifically. You should ask him about his brother." Emma froze, her mind racing. Brother? What did Jake mean? Before she could press him for details, the call ended abruptly. "Sometimes, the hardest battles aren't fought on the battlefield, they're fought within ourselves," Alexander murmured during a late-night meeting weeks later. At the time, Emma dismissed it as poetic musings. Now, she wondered if those words held deeper meaning. Back home, Emma began piecing together clues. She discovered that Alexander's younger brother had served in Afghanistan alongside Jake, and tragically lost his life during their deployment. Guilt-ridden, Alexander dedicated his fortune to helping veterans but struggled to connect emotionally until he met Emma. Her compassion reminded him of the humanity he'd been trying to reclaim. Just as Emma considered confronting Alexander about his past, a scandal erupted. A rival company accused the Hartwell Foundation of misusing funds, sparking outrage online. Suddenly, Emma found herself thrust into the center of a media firestorm. How could she defend the foundation and protect the man who had given her hope? The scandal hit like a storm, threatening to destroy everything Emma and Alexander had worked so hard to build. Headlines screamed accusations of corruption, and social media buzzed with outrage. Donors began pulling their support, and even some veterans who had benefited from the foundation questioned its integrity. For Emma, it felt like the ground beneath her feet was crumbling. But instead of retreating, Emma decided to fight back, not just for herself, but for everyone who depended on the foundation. She spent sleepless nights combing through financial records, meeting with accountants, and drafting statements to prove the allegations were false. Her determination caught Alexander off guard. "You don't have to do this," he told her one evening as they pored over documents in his office. "This isn't your burden to carry." "Yes, it is," Emma replied firmly. "If we don't clear our names, all the good work you've done will be erased. And I won't let that happen." Her words struck a chord with Alexander. He watched her tirelessly advocate for the foundation, her passion unwavering despite the chaos around them. Slowly, he began opening up about his own struggles, the guilt he carried over his brother's death, the pressure of running a massive organization, and the loneliness that came with wealth. "You remind me of him," Alexander admitted one night as they sat side by side, surrounded by stacks of papers. "My brother. He believed in people the way you do. He saw the best in everyone, even when it wasn't easy." Emma reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. "But maybe this is your chance to honor him, to show the world what he stood for." Their professional relationship began shifting into something more profound. Late-night conversations turned into shared meals, quiet laughter, and moments of understanding. Emma realized that beneath Alexander's polished exterior lay a man burdened by grief yet driven by love. For his brother, for veterans, and now, perhaps, for her. Meanwhile, Lily grew curious about the changes in her mother's life. "Who's Mr. Hartwell?" she asked one evening as Emma tucked her into bed. "Is he your boyfriend?" Emma laughed nervously. "No, sweetheart. He's just someone I work with." But deep down, she wondered if there was truth in Lily's innocent question. Could she allow herself to trust again after years of focusing solely on survival? Could she open her heart to someone like Alexander? "Do you think love can heal old wounds?" Emma asked Alexander during a rare moment of vulnerability. His response surprised her. "I think love can make us brave enough to try." As the scandal unfolded, Emma uncovered evidence proving the rival company had fabricated the accusations to sabotage the foundation. With Alexander's guidance, she presented the findings to the press, clearing their names and restoring public trust. The victory brought them closer than ever, but it also revealed a deeper connection neither of them had anticipated. Just as Emma considered taking a leap of faith with Alexander, another revelation surfaced, one that tied her past to Jake and Alexander in ways she never imagined. What secret linked them all together? And how would it change her future? The revelation came unexpectedly during a quiet afternoon at the Foundation's office. Emma was sorting through files when she stumbled upon an old photograph tucked inside a folder labeled Veterans Outreach Program. The image showed 3 young men in military uniforms, standing proudly against a desert backdrop. One of them was unmistakably Jake, years younger but still recognizable. Another was Alexander's brother, whose name Emma now knew was Daniel Hartwell. And the third. Her breath caught in her throat. It was her father. Emma sank into a chair, staring at the photo as memories flooded back. She had been only 5 years old when her father died while serving overseas. Her mother rarely spoke about him, and over time, his face faded from her memory. But seeing him here, alongside Jake and Daniel, sent shockwaves through her heart. Trembling, Emma confronted Alexander. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, holding up the photo. His expression softened as he took it from her hands. "I didn't know how," he admitted quietly. "When I first heard your last name, I suspected there might be a connection. But I needed to be sure before saying anything." He explained that her father, Robert Taylor, had been close friends with both Daniel and Jake during their deployment. They'd served together, fought together, and ultimately saved each other's lives on more than one occasion. When Daniel died in combat, Jake promised to look out for Robert, but tragically, Robert was killed months later in a roadside attack. Jake carried the weight of that promise ever since. "That's why I reached out to you," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not just someone who inspires me, you're part of my family, part of Daniel's legacy." Emma felt tears streaming down her cheeks as the pieces fell into place. Her act of kindness toward Jake wasn't random. It was fate reconnecting threads that had been severed long ago. In helping Jake, she had unknowingly honored her father's memory, and forged a new bond with Alexander. With the scandal behind them, Emma threw herself into her role at the Foundation, pouring her energy into programs that supported veterans and struggling families. Together, she and Alexander launched initiatives aimed at providing housing, counseling, and job training to those in need. Their shared mission brought them even closer, until one evening, under the twinkling lights of Central Park, Alexander knelt before her and asked her to spend the rest of her life by his side. Emma accepted, knowing that love, like kindness, had the power to heal wounds and rewrite destinies. Lily adored Alexander, calling him the cool dad who always made her laugh. As a family, they found joy in moments big and small, cherishing the second chances life had given them. In the end, Emma decided to write a book about her journey, dedicating it to Jake, Daniel, and her father. The title said it all, Ripples of Kindness, How One Act Can Change Everything. Sometimes, the smallest gestures create the biggest waves, Emma wrote in the final chapter. And sometimes, those waves bring us home. On the day of the book's release, Emma received a letter from Jake. He thanked her not just for the money she'd given him, but for reigniting his belief in humanity. Enclosed was a check, for every cent he'd raised through donations. "Use this to keep changing lives," he wrote. "Because you already changed mine." As Emma stood on stage at a charity gala, receiving applause from hundreds of supporters, she glanced across the room at Alexander holding Lily's hand. For the first time in years, she felt truly whole. Her act of kindness had set off a chain reaction that transformed not only her life but countless others. And though challenges lay ahead, she faced them with hope, knowing that compassion always finds its way back. If Emma's story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness always comes back tenfold.